And he was talking about possible flare-ups. Well, throughout this week, we've been focusing on unstable politics in some of South Africa's provinces and asking whether the violence in the northwest is an indicator of what could happen in other provinces. KwaZulu-Natal has been marked by factional battles, and tensions have been running high in that province since 2015. Now, in that year, a new leadership was elected under Sihle Zikalala, who is seen to be close to former President Jacob Zuma. But a group of rebels successfully nullified the provincial elective conference in the courts. They were aligned to the former Premier Lukhona Mnguni, who is seen to be close to the current President Cyril Ramaphosa. In January, ANC Secretary-General Shule formally suspended the disputed executive members to replace them with interim leaders. So what happens now? To discuss, we're joined in Durban by political analyst Lukhona Mnguni. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Mnguni. Let's just start with the overall picture. We've seen pictures of people with drawn guns. There's been marches to ANC offices in KwaZulu-Natal. What is the state of politics in the province?
Well, good evening. Someone defined the state of politics to be one that is precarious in this province insofar as the ANC is concerned. And this was by one institute that actually hosted a roundtable last week on this matter. And, you know, one of the things that came out there was there is now starting to be a lack of accountability for those that are deployed in government to the party, because the party leadership, of course, is an interim one, and therefore its constitutional powers are actually not that many. So what they should be doing is to try and ready the province for the various conferences that need to happen at regions and at the provincial level. And then you arrive at a provincial conference, hopefully a conference that will not be disputed, as you have said in your introduction, that the November 2015 conference was actually disputed. What seems to be problematic, though, is that the ANC National Executive Committee doesn't have a clear way on how to handle factionalism when it has crystallized itself to a position where it almost renders paralyzed the structures of a province such as KwaZulu-Natal. This is a very important province for the ANC. The ANC started off here in 1994 as an opposition party. They've worked very hard to become a governing party, which only happened 10 years after democracy. And then this is, of course, the second most populous province in the country. So its contribution to the voter share at a national level is actually very important. So you want to go to the elections of 2019 with quite a homogeneous province, people working together, shoulder to the wheel, and wanting to make sure that they deliver a resounding victory for the ANC. Currently, that is seemingly under threat, and it's under threat for a variety of reasons. There are people who want a conference to happen now, this year, before we go to the national and provincial elections of next year. There are people who think that it is best possible that you go for a conference after the elections. Now, of course, these arguments are made on the counting of a balance of forces. It seems those that want a conference now are those that feel they still command a sizable majority within the province, and therefore they would win the conference. And if they are delayed any longer to beyond elections, it may be that their base in terms of constituencies that would vote for them within the ANC would start weakening and waning, and that would mean that come elections, because the Premier is appointed at Luthuli House, the province only proposes 3 names, and then at a level of the National Executive Committee, 1 name must be confirmed. And some people know that the National Executive Committee, by far and large, I mean, even if it's a small margin, it's made up of a majority of people that are not in the side of people that support the likes of Sihle Zikalala and so on. So therefore, the chances of a Sihle Zikalala or someone aligned to his faction being appointed the Premier next year, absent a provincial conference that would affirm them as leadership, would actually be very small. And now this is what I call reverse capture of the party. So you say, let's not have conference now. Let's go to these elections. Let's appoint a premier that is aligned to the National Executive Committee, and then hope that that premier will use their clout in government, their patronage in government, to actually capture the constituencies of the ANC, rally them behind him or her, and then go to a conference, and then you win with a leadership that by far and large is aligned to the vision and also the leadership of the National Executive Committee. However, as you can hear, all of this is long-winded. It's nowhere near finding a solution, and that's because the National Executive Committee still wants to confine the possibility of a solution to the people who are pretty much antagonists of this cause of factionalism in this province. So you say, let's have an interim committee that involves all sides of the divide, but some people feel they have a less share of that than others. I would have thought that there's a mechanism within the ANC where you bring a council of elders that probably are even from the Veterans League and not necessarily from the National Executive Committee, a council of elders to try and build systems of dialogue, first and foremost, to bring closer the sides that are in conflict and therefore lead them to a conference, hoping that these are credible leaders in terms of the Council of Elders who would make sure that they act impartially and deliver a conference that cannot be contested. At this current moment, I do not see that there is quite a crystal clear solution to the causes of factionalism here in KwaZulu-Natal particularly.
Okay, so what you've outlined is that this talk of unity that we're hearing from the top six is not real. It's a complete fig leaf. There's still these strong factions. I'm interested, how strong is the Zikalala faction? And let's just clarify that that's the faction aligned to Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, to the former president Jacob Zuma. How strong are they in that province in light of the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa is now president?
Well, it's very difficult to tell how strong a faction is without seeing their strength being tested at conference. So you will know that a number of regional conferences in regions like Moses Mabhida, Herigwala, they've had to be suspended or postponed rather because of the type of things we have seen in Musadladla. We've seen people drawing guns at each other and all these other skirmishes that really threaten people's lives, on top of the number of politically motivated types of killings that we have seen in the province in the last year and a half, last 2 years. So it's very difficult to tell if the Zikalala aligned faction is still as strong as it may have been by 2015. The very fact that it's become possible for the other side to hold them at ransom in terms of running roughshod over processes of the ANC, whether it is preparing for regional conferences, whether it is in terms of constituting those branch general meetings that must happen in preparation towards a conference. The very fact that there's a sense of they cannot have their will as they used to, and they cannot constitute meetings marginalizing others. So that means that those who were once a minority are no longer that small a minority. They may still be in the minority, but definitely their share of support in the province is growing, and this is what is actually probably threatening those that still support Zikalala, that if you leave it to the passage of time for too long without a conference, it may be that some people will start being disinterested and also seeing possibly some actions that are being taken by Cyril Ramaphosa and certain other leaders at the national government, and desiring those to actually trickle down to how governance is run in KwaZulu-Natal in terms of taking seriously questions of governance, questions of accountability, questions of rooting out corruption, and making sure that you stifle this gatekeeping and you stifle this overly stated patronage networks that have been made almost a culture of the ANC at all levels, from local sphere to the national sphere in the last 10 years. So it may be that people start being attracted and getting used to the idea that Cyril Ramaphosa is the president, and therefore that would mean that Zikalala's grouping would lose its base. So it's important that they want a conference as soon as possible. So I wouldn't actually say they are X amount strong, but they are still, according to where I am seated, leading, but their lead is only as good as they can secure a conference as soon as possible.
Lukhona, we're running out of time. Final question. Could the IFP, could other parties benefit from the disarray that you've outlined?
Well, I do not think the IFP per se, if you look at the IFP figures since 1994, when they secured 10-point-something%, they have been gradually declining by 2% at every election. I don't think that picture is going to change anytime soon. It may be that a party like the Democratic Alliance that has been making inroads even to northern districts like Mkanyakude in KwaZulu-Natal, where we never thought the DA would penetrate, it will continue to make gains. And of course, the EFF is one party that we are looking whether it is going to be able to grow here in KwaZulu-Natal. There has been this challenge which some of its leaders are starting to acknowledge, that in the coastline the EFF is not growing as much as they would like it to, so we are looking forward to that. But I don't think that this weakening of the ANC currently is going to be an automatic gain for the IFP, and you will know that the IFP has its own issues. They had initially told us they'll go to a conference, install a new leadership, and that doesn't seem to be happening, and people seem to be wanting something fresh, something new, and I do not think that they represent that currently.
All right, thank you. So we've been looking at the provinces. Could KwaZulu-Natal, I guess it's already a flashpoint given the unstable politics there. Thank you, Lukhona Mnguni.